Would you like some company in your kitchen? Someone you could chat to, high five when you have a success, ask those niggling questions and bounce ideas off. The Ancestral Kitchen podcast community has all this and more. We have a non-social media forum where we question, share knowledge, run ideas past each other and learn together. Once a month we get together live and chat all the things ancestral in the kitchen. There are extra private podcasts. Get more of Andrea and me talking intimately to keep you company. And there are many helpful, inspiring downloads. Come and feel part of something, reveling in a community that cares about the same things that you do. There are 5 levels of involvement to choose from, depending on your budget, and every penny that you pledge goes to helping Andrea and me to continue this work, supporting everyone else who wants to cook this way, changing the world one plate at a time. We get lots of questions from supporters and listeners about milling your own flour and thought it was about time we brought them all together into a Q&A. This episode is packed with information. We'll start with troubleshooting bread made with freshly milled flour, including why your bread might not be rising as much, why you might have experienced pancaking, and why freshly milled flour breads need more water and how to best transition to that. We'll then go on to talk about sifting, the details of how to do it and the nutritional effects. We'll talk about storing grain, whether we're personally concerned with the heat that grinding grains at home produces, and then how we store excess flour. We cover freshly milling gluten-free grains, including a deep dive into oats, and we talk about all the other things you can use your home mill for, and there are lots of them. Whether you have a mill or whether you're just thinking about getting a mill, this episode will bring you something new.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast.
I'm Alison, a European town dweller living in England.
And I'm Andrea, living on a family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA.
Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Alison. Happy afternoon.
Thank you.
I don't know why I started with
I thought you were going to say happy birthday for tomorrow. I was all ready for that.
Well, I was, and then I thought, no, wait a minute. It's not your birthday in podcast time, even though it isn't. We celebrated your birthday on the last recording.
Yeah, exactly.
So threw myself off. Well, hey, happy day. Happy day to you.
To you. Same to you.
I guess you're doing great.
Yes.
All right. Well, did you eat before we got on today?
Yes. We had intentional leftovers. Made too much yesterday on purpose. Made double of faggots. Do you know what faggots are?
No, you'll have to explain it to me.
Okay. Faggots are an English dish, I was just talking about the etymology of them yesterday, which is interesting because originally there were parcels of liver wrapped in fat. And, you can get the same dish in Italy. And in Italy, it's called fegatelli. And you understand why it's called fegatelli.
Oh.
Because liver's called fegato.
Yeah.
But why is it called faggot? Something really similar to fegatelli with the F-A-G-G thing in England when liver's called liver, not fegato. Anyone who's into etymology, you can tell me the etymology of faggots. I would be grateful.
We need the researchers.
Were originally a dish made of liver, wrapped in spices and stuff, wrapped in caul fat, which is the lacy-like fat which goes around the organs in a pig and any other animal. But modern recipes for faggots tend to have muscle meat in as well, not just liver. And the recipe that I originally based this on was sent to me by Amelia, who's a supporter in Wales. And the recipe had pork belly and kidney and liver and bacon in. And I didn't have all those things.
Oh my gosh.
So I put the kidney in and the liver in and pork mince and bacon. This time I didn't have any bacon, so I just put pork mince, liver and kidneys in. And wrapping it in the cool fat is such fun. Cool fat is so beautiful. Anyone who hasn't worked with it can get it. It's just, it's amazing. It's so thin, and yet it wraps the little balls of kind of meatballs really well and keeps them all together. So, I don't use eggs because Gabriel has problems with eggs. And so I'm sometimes struggle to keep my meatballs together because they haven't got eggs in. But with cool fat, you can do whatever you want because you just wrap them in this cool fat.
So are you cutting it into little pieces?
Yeah, well, I kind of do it as I go along. I open up a bit, put it on the board, put the ball of meat in the middle, and then I think, kind of can be about that much, and I get the scissors and I chop it round, and then I shape it round. Sometimes I just kind of tear it a bit with my hands, and then I put those in the oven. And last time I made a stock with trotters from the same pig, and I then cooked a lot of onions up and reduced it and made a really, really oniony trotter stock to go over the top. Gabriel wasn't too keen on that last time. He said it was too sweet, didn't like it. And if you put a lot of onions in something like that, like French onion soup, it tends to go really quite sweet. So this time I just got a cube of pork stock out of the freezer and thickened it with some fine oatmeal, stone ground oats, and then poured that over the top, put it in the oven, and we had it yesterday. Then today I heated up the half that was left, actually in a saucepan with some of the liquid in the bottom, and I just threw a load of cauliflower on the top raw, and so the things had heated through and the cauliflower cooked and the sauce was lovely and warm, and we had that with bread. I had gluten-free bread, Rob had rye bread, and Gabriel had spelt bread. It's like bread factory.
Oh my gosh.
I had butter.
3 little bears with all your different breads.
So
it's amazing.
It was delicious. If you look online for a recipe for faggots, you'll find it. So and they're
I'm totally marveling. It's never occurred to me to cut it up and wrap small pieces of meat in it. I mean, this is just...
You could use it just to put...
I guess so.
Anything.
Yeah. I mean, I've always just thought of using it for, a big piece of meat that the caul fat is big enough for. I feel like my world has changed. Just
pieces of meat, particularly ones that aren't fatty, because you can add fat. You add that cool fat. It's like a layer of fat around the outside, which just keeps all the, the good juice.
Yeah.
But I thought, this is so good. I could use it to make sausages. I could use it for all these other things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, I love that. I haven't had breakfast, but I had an amazing dinner last night. Okay. I have a friend staying here. She's leaving today actually, but she's been here for a week, and she was one of my yoga teachers back in Virginia Beach, and she comes out every year for about a week, and we just spend time together talking and basically cooking a lot. And she's vegetarian and eats fish, and so it's kind of fun for me because it's a exercise in cooking without, like lots of pork broth or big pieces of meat. And I mean, I was telling her I should be recording this menu for that menu booklet thing, because it's every day we're just like, wow, this is the best meal. This is the best meal. And last night she taught me how to make palak paneer, which is an Indian dish. And she travels to India pretty much every year and stays for a while. And she has friends there who teach her to cook. And so she brings these ideas back to me. And so she made this last night. I didn't end up being in the kitchen the whole time that she was working, but we started by making paneer cheese, which is, as far as I'm understanding, it's basically you're making a ricotta, and then we squeeze it in the butter muslin to make it into like kind of a block of cheese rather than the crumbled pieces of cheese. So kind of like a pressed ricotta. And then she cut that into cubes later during the cooking. And then she made what's called a gravy. So we have green garlic and fresh spring onions. She basically sat down on the floor and went through my spice drawer, and she pulled out tons. We have fresh cardamom and everything. All the spices were freshly ground in the mortar and pestle. Nothing was stale or dry. And she used, I don't even know. I asked her, how many spices did you use? She was like, I lost count. She used a lot. We had fresh herbs in there and then tons of spinach, tons and tons of spinach. And so all of this is kind of ground together into this, oh man, it's so delicious, Allison, into this kind of gravy that she toasted on butter. She said usually she sees people use olive oil, but I don't have olive oil. So then she cubes in this paneer and it's so delicious. And then there's this new, it's amazing. When we were eating it, I said, I sprinkled a little salt on and I said, oh man, this just made the colors pop. And then I said, I mean the spices. And she goes, no, I think you got it right the first time. And I said, yeah, I feel like I see spices like colors when I'm eating them. So then that was amazing.
Like when you
Probably I'm a synesthesia or something. Yeah. Oliver Sacks, what?
Yeah.
But anyways, then we also had it. This would also be traditionally served with, I think, rice, but I don't have any rice. So I had these 3 little tiny loaves from the gluten-free bakery, and she sliced them and toasted them. And so then you kind of like scooping it with the bread. It was so good.
Nice. You can get the sauce up that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we feasted.
Sounds lovely. I think maybe, it would have traditionally made with ghee, depending on what part.
Yeah. That was my guess too. I had some ghee I had made when she first got here, but we burned through it pretty quickly. So we were just using raw butter that I had churned. So I mean, it was as fresh as could be. But yeah, so anyways, that's food.
Wow.
Let's I know. Look at us eating all these fancy feasts right over here. So we've got some fun new stuff happening with our supporters community, though. You and I and the listeners have talked and discussed and done many things, come up with plans. Some of this news came out in the last episode, so let's talk about it.
Level for the supporters, rather than having 4 levels, we now have 5. So they're all different financial levels, depending on what your budget is. We have a new level called fellowship, which is kind of in the middle of the financial options, and that level is the level at which, if you join us at that level or move to that level, then you're starting to help put aside some funds so that the 2 of us can take some money for the work that we do. So anyone who joins at that level, we're grateful to everyone. We're grateful to you too.
Yeah,
that's not only helping pay for the technical costs of the podcast and the community, but also helping to give us some money for all the work that we're putting in. So you can go to Ancestral Kitchen Podcast /join to see all the details and the levels.
That's new and exciting.
It is new and exciting. And also, if you haven't listened to that other episode, go back. It's called Behind the Scenes, because there's some quite interesting stuff in there about behind the scenes.
I thought it was pretty funny, actually. I only remember my face hurt after we were done recording. I don't know why. Everything was cracking me up that day.
And just before we get into the topic, I also wanted to talk about the sweatshirt. So I went to the Leeds Food History Symposium a couple of weeks ago.
I'm not jealous at all. That doesn't bother me one bit.
It's in York, which is the county town of Yorkshire in England. And I wore an Ancestral Kitchen Podcast sweatshirt, which started many conversations, which is wonderful,
I want to hear all about Allison, because so much has been happening. I feel like we talk so much more usually. Like sometimes before we start recording, I even know what you ate because I already asked you before we started recording. I didn't know today, and we haven't even hardly had time to info dump about this thing. I just have I'm so excited to hear about it. But
it was really informative, really fun. Lots of very interesting and interested people there, and lots of people looked at my t-shirt and asked questions. So we have if you go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/merch, there's a link in the show notes. You can see all of the sustainable, ethical Ancestral Kitchen podcast clothing and bags and aprons that are available for you to purchase and show off and tell the world.
I put some more stuff in there, Allison. I don't know if you've had a chance to go look.
No, I'll do that.
You might be surprised.
Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about home milling in this episode. And the first thing I wanted to do was to say that we've had lots of other episodes on kind of sourdough and milling. And there's one particular one, episode 82, which is called Home Milling Flour for the Best Bread. In that, we talked all about home mills. So if you're specifically interested in the differences between the home mills and, which one we recommend and what are the pros and cons of them, go back and listen to episode 82 because we won't specifically be covering that in this episode. In that 82, we talked about why you'd want to mill your flour, why it's healthier, how it's more economical, how you can use fresh grains when you don't have a mill, the types of mills, roller mill versus stone milling, your options for your kitchen. My mill, the Mock Mill 100, all you can grind in the Mock Mill and how to use it, and just how different it is to standard shop-bought pre-ground flour. So do go back and listen to that. But there's also an after show on that episode.
Wow, we covered a lot in that episode. Jeez.
And that's an
How did we cram all that in?
In the after show, which is available to supporters, we talked about how to adapt all-purpose flour recipes to whole grain home milled flour. And we talked about the autolyse process. We talked about sieving, and we talked literally and practically about the economics of shop-bought flour compared to bulk grain buying. So if you're really interested in home milling, go back and listen to that. We've also got lots of other episodes that focus on sourdough. 103 is called Baking with Ancient Grains. 72, all about spelt sourdough. 41, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. 51, Sourdough Q&A. 110, Baking Pans with Ellie from Ellie's Everyday. And number 7, back in the old days, when we'd only done 6 other podcasts, not 130 something. And that's called Sourdough, Why We Love It. So,
didn't take us long to get to that subject, did it?
Not at all. If you want to listen to any of those episodes, you can go to our website, Ancestral Kitchen Podcast, and there's a search facility under the episodes menu, and you can pop those titles in and it will come up. Obviously, you can find them on your podcast app as well. We've also got our Ancestral Kitchen Podcast Guide to Milling Your Own Flour, which is in the download section of our website. There's a link in the show notes for that. So that's kind of our previous milling episodes. This one, we are focusing on questions that have come in from supporters. So thank you ever so much to everyone for all the questions that you sent in. They are all really interesting, and I had to go down a few rabbit holes to make sure I was 100% in what I was offering in the episode, which was really fun for me as well. We have an after show on this podcast because there were too many questions. I looked at the list and I was like, we're never going to fit that in. So in the after show, we will be talking specifically about how to make a lighter, a less crumbly sandwich bread with 100% freshly milled flour. And we will also be talking about wet milling. So by that, I mean milling for masa, for corn dough, and also milling for things like tahini and nut butters. So that's in the after show. So if you are a supporter, you can go to your private podcast feed and you will see that ready for you to listen to. Let's go to an ad break and then we will dive in. Are you looking for kitchen inspiration? Perhaps you're fed up with trying to make the recipes you find online suit your family. Would you like to try the dishes that we make in our kitchens every day? Andrea and I have penned 3 cookbooks that are there to support you to make ancestral food come to life in your own home. Meals at the Ancestral Hearth, our first cookbook, has 20 foundational ancestral meals, all of which come directly from our kitchens. Spelt Sourdough Every Day is my baby, taking you through how to bake a myriad of delicious ancient grain goodies. And the Pastured Pork Cookbook shares our love of this often overlooked meat, with over 35 recipes featuring heritage pork, offal and lard. Each book costs just $12, or you can get all 3 for $30, saving you $6. And all of the funds go directly to keeping us on the air. Head to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/shop and get cooking. Okay, so using freshly milled flour is not the same as using shop-bought flour, and sometimes that can cause us problems when we switch over. And so I wanted to focus first of all on troubleshooting kind of what's different. Andrew, do you want to have a look at the first question? And
Yeah. So this one comes up pretty much every time somebody starts baking with home milled flour. Why aren't my breads rising as much
yeah,
once they move from like a white flour to a home milled flour?
home milled, yeah. And there are two reasons for that. And there's the scientific one, which is generally when you first milled your flour, that the gluten in your flour is not as strong as flour that's been left to sit. So there's a process called maturing, which bakers can use for freshly milled flour, where they basically just leave it and it oxidizes. So basically the grain is open, you've milled it, and oxygen can access it. That will make the flour stronger. The scientific reason for that is because oxygen exposure promotes the formation of disulfide bridges between gluten proteins, creating a more cohesive and elastic network, apparently.
Wow.
So if you grind your flour fresh, you're not going to have those disulfide bridges. Commercially, oxidizing agents are added to achieve aging in a few hours. So if you go and look at
They actually
they add things to it.
actually want it to oxidize.
They can't wait for it to oxidize naturally. They want it to oxidize quickly. So they add, you might see if you look at a loaf in a store, ascorbic acid, chlorine dioxide, or azodicarbonamide. Say that quickly 7 times.
That is just completely boggles my mind because everything we do in life is kind of avoiding oxidizing.
Yeah, exactly. And this is saying...
And that's insane that it's actually intentionally doing it. Wow. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Only because they want the bread to rise more. You know, it's a matter of, again, what do you expect from your bread? What do you want from your bread? And well, obviously we want it to rise more, don't we? Because that's the bread that we see in the pictures. So that's what they do. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do from our perspective, I don't think. If you want to take advantage of that, though, and try it, you can mix your bread for longer. That's what everyone who has kind of addressed this says. Spend more time mixing your bread to allow the formation of the gluten network more fully. So that's one reason why your bread's not rise as much. In my experience, the main reason why your breads may not rise as much is because probably you're overproofing them. So there's a huge difference between working with shop-bought flour, which has been in a bag for you're not quite sure how long, and you're bringing it into your kitchen to make bread, and making bread with flour that you've literally just ground from a grain. And it's so easy that home milled flour will be more active, have more microbes on it, and be super ready to ferment, and will ferment much more quickly than a shop-bought flour. You'll find later on that there's a comment from one of our listeners in Canada who calls shop-bought flour dead flour. And that's why you might call it dead flour, because when you freshly mill your grain, you realise how active flour is that's freshly milled. And so it's so easy to overproof it, particularly if you've been making bread with shop-bought flour for a long time. You get used to it. You get used to how long it takes.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you find it takes half the time to proof. You know, I had this when I swapped, when I bought my Mockmill 100 and I swapped from milling with milled flour from a mill to my own flour. I had to pay attention to my breads and actually watch them, not go into automatic mode, because I was too easily overproofing them. And then I'd end up with a loaf, you know, with a flying crust or with dents or with big holes in it by mistake. So I would say the main reason why your breads don't rise as much is that you're overproofing. So experiment with cutting back that proofing time, watch your actual dough, look for the size change, and put it in the oven earlier.
I can see your attention in this, Allison, in that in Discord when people post pictures of bread, you're like a bread doctor and that you can diagnose. I think what you did was, and they always say, "Oh, you're right." So and I know this is because you've done it all. So you've seen what happens.
It's hard to tell when you're not in someone's kitchen and you haven't seen what they've done. But still saying that, it is easy to perhaps read between lines and see, hang on, what's going on here? And I know, like you said, because I've done that myself many times in my own kitchen. So we had a similar question, which is, why do all my breads ferment more quickly? Why do all my breads pancake? And that's the same thing. Over fermentation, the bread will pancake because it's fermented far more than the gluten network in it can handle. And so it goes and kind of pancakes. So
tells you your flour's really good, though.
It tells you your flour's good, for sure. So again, if your breads are pancaking, it's because they're fermenting more quickly because the grain is alive and much more active. Andrew, do you want to read what Serena said?
Yep.
I think this is the one with the dead flowers.
Yeah. Serena says, I'm an avid home miller. I honestly don't have any questions, but I do wish that Canadian listeners knew that Como makes a mill specifically for Canadians with a larger motor. It's the Como Mio Eco Plus. I have it and love it. I think something that would have helped me when I first started this journey was understanding how much quicker freshly milled flour ferments and how there's a learning curve to using it in recipes that you have been making for years with dead flour. And is this part of the question or was this a question from Serena, or is this a separate question? Why doesn't okay.
No, Serena doesn't have a question. She just wanted to say that.
Okay. Okay.
But I feel
that's a great tip.
It's the same thing. She's experienced what I've experienced, that freshly milled flour ferments so much quickly, and therefore you have to relearn how to make the bread. There is another question. Do you want to read that question, Andrew?
Yep. Why doesn't my grain grind as finely?
Yeah.
So were we saying as finely as the commercial? Okay.
Yeah, as finely as the flour that I buy from the shop. And I think the first response I have to that question is, you should see what they do in modern roller mills. I mean, you wouldn't.
What do they do?
If you went to a place where there's a roller mill, and it's not just a roller mill, is it? It's like some massive piece of machinery and on a sieve, all of these places. And
I kind of want to go see one now.
They are industrial, and they are specifically designed to get the flour as fine as possible, and they sift it and separate it and put things back together. They don't grind the whole grain and just give you the whole grain when you buy whole grain flour. They grind the grain and separate it, and then they put the bran back in to the white flour later on if you want to buy whole grain flour. Yeah. And
what do they do to the bran? Do they super pulverize it or something?
I don't know. They just want to have it separate.
Okay.
Weigh it and do things.
Sorry.
Do experiments on it and things.
Oh, jeez.
So if you
Frankenstein your wheat back together.
If you compare that to what we're doing, what I'm doing in my kitchen with a mock mill and 2 stones and electricity, basically, if I'm not using my hand grinder, that's a completely different process. It's a stone process. It's done in my kitchen. It is not going to come out necessarily as finely as the flour that you would find in the supermarket, especially not the white flour, which is just the endosperm, which grinds a lot more finely than the bran does. Different mills do offer different fineness. So we have 2 mills. We have the Mock Mill 100, which is electric, and then we have an Italian Marcato Marga, which is a hand crank mill. And that one, if you put the grain through it, it's kind of rustic, would be the nice way of saying it. It's quite big particles. If you want to have a fine flour, you're not going to get it from that. And that's an extreme, but different mills do have different fineness. There is something you can do, which is you can try grinding it twice. So I'm not really experienced this much with the 100 mock mill because I find it just grinds fine enough for me on number 1, which is the smallest grind. And I use that and I have no problems with it at all. But I do know other listeners have put their grains through the mill once and then literally put it through again to get it more fine. So that's
the whole thing, or
the whole
like sieved. Okay,
you could sieve it and put the bits that are left through again. That would be more work, but that's possible too. Yeah.
I mean, if you had a specific goal, I want to make an angel food cake or something, I could, it'd be worth it.
Yeah.
To do something like that.
Probably.
Okay. All right. You ready for the next one?
Mm-hmm. I am.
Okay. All right. This is from Molly. Oh, yay. This is in response to your question, asking for questions. Oh, yay. I got on here to ask about why everything I make with fresh milled flour is so dry. I know that fresh milled flour absorbs more water. Is there a general recommendation for how much more? Do I just have to go by feel? And if so, how do I know what it's supposed to feel like? This is good. I like this.
Yeah.
I like this.
Yes, it does absorb more flour. Freshly milled flour, absorbs more water. It's really difficult for me to give a recommendation for how much more you would want to add to your bread dough because, my rye is going to be different from your rye. My spelt's going to be different from your spelt. My spelt next season is going to be different from my spelt this season. Every soil is different. Right. Every grain's different. And so when you translate that to another variable, freshly milled, it's so difficult to say, you have to add 25% more water. Ideally, as Molly's kind of saying, we go by feel and we become intuitive bakers. That's hard at the beginning of the journey, though. If you're at the beginning of your journey and if you've messed up a loaf, you just think, just someone tell me, what to do. So if you are at the beginning of the journey, I'd say start with 10% more or 15% more, and then note what happens. And then try it again the next time, perhaps with 18% more, or if it was too much, 12% more. You just have to repeat, and remember, i.e. take notes, because you won't remember if you don't. Remember what happens. If you end up putting too much more in, then you can always put your bread in a pan to stop it being completely overhydrated and just going into a kind of a flatbread in the oven. So that, I think...
If somebody has a super dense loaf, you and I know how expensive those loaves are. We're not throwing them out. I sent out in our podcast newsletter maybe a month or two ago your recipe from your blog for bread lasagna. I forget exactly what you called it. That would be a really good use for a super dense loaf that you wanted to make use of. Also, when you said take note, Allison, I just cannot wait for you to go on and see the T-mill thing. So I'm going to tell you one thing that I put in there. My friend helped me put together a cover for a kitchen notebook with our conversion tables on the front. So you can take the notebook in the kitchen, the conversion tables are right there, and you can...
you can take notes in that.
Yeah, you can take notes on your bread. I'm just itching for you to go see it. Yeah, okay, sorry.
I should try to remember to put the recipe for bread lasagna in the show notes as well. I've just made a note of that.
Yeah, you should.
Next question. Do you want to read me the next one?
Yep, this is a classic one. How can I store my grain? This is pre-milled, obviously.
This is, before it's been milled. How can I store my whole grain when it comes to me in bags of however many kilos? You need to put it somewhere dry. That's the very, very important. You don't need to freeze it, but you can if you want to. If you do decide you want to freeze it, you should wrap it well in the freezer to stop it absorbing any flavours or smells from the freezer. The reason you might want to freeze it is because of weevils. So generally you wouldn't need to freeze it because grain can last hundreds, thousands of years without any problems at all. Archaeologists have grain from antiquity and still found it's fine. So you don't need to freeze it. But if you live in a particularly kind of hot or humid environment, weevils can be a problem in grains. And we have talked about this in previous episodes. There are eggs in the bag of grains when it's delivered to you, and in humid conditions those eggs can hatch. So the way to avoid that is by freezing your grain just for a short amount of time to kill the eggs before you put it in your cupboard. If you don't have a big freezer, which I don't, you can do it in batches. So you then kind of cycle your grain. Say you've got a bag of 20 kilos, you could take 5 kilos at a time, freeze them for a week, a couple of days, take them out, and then move the next batch of 5 kilos in. So you don't need to have a massive freezer to freeze your grains. And I always freeze mine for a week. I was going to say something else.
Okay.
Which was, just if you think you potentially might have had weevils, or if you've had weevils before, you're probably going to think, I want to do that, because it is quite sad to open a bag of flour that's, 30 pounds, 15 kilos, and find weevils in it. Because you end up just having to throw it away. And that feels really sad. So, to be on the side of caution, then you could freeze it, but you don't need to. You could just put it in the cupboard. It's absolutely fine.
Okay.
And we had weevils once in Italy. We haven't had them since then. So, that's it.
All right. Okay. Next question is another really good one. My flour gets hot when milling. What about this? Good, bad?
Yeah. So we don't really want our flour to get hot over a certain temperature anyway, because the hotter a flour gets, the more likely it is that the enzymes in the flour are going to be killed and things are going to be denatured. So the main thing for flour warming, which it will warm if you are milling, the flour that comes out of my Mock Mill 100, it does warm up. It's not the same temperature as the grains that go in it at the beginning. So you need to pay attention to the manufacturer recommendations for how long you can run that machine for. They've done tests on it. They've had all the thermometers out. They've tested it. They know. So look that up before you start with your mill. How long can I run this for? And then after I've run it for that long, how long do I need to leave it for it to cool down? That's
okay.
Important. And that cool down, that's resting your machine. So don't slam your machine with, grinding 5 kilos of flour in a row. Give it time to rest. The other thing you can do if you have frozen your berries is take your berries straight from the freezer. So another reason why you might want to freeze your berries is because you know that your berries get hot when they go through the mill, and you don't want that to be the case. Maybe your loaf overproofs if you end up with flour too hot because you're in a hot environment. So you can keep your berries in the freezer and freeze them straight and mill them straight from the freezer. And then they're starting the whole process at a lower temperature. And so they're going to end the process at a lower temperature as well.
I never thought about doing that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea
to do. Okay. I've got some other topics to move on to. So let's take an ad break now and we will come back in a moment.
Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye.
Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk about sieving, storing, a bit more about storing, and the settings on your home mill. We've got some questions about oat and about corn, and we've got some questions about gluten-free grains.
Okay.
Do you want to start with the question from Rachel?
I do. Best way to store extra flour if you mill more than you need at the moment? What are the ideal and acceptable time frames to use freshly milled flour within?
Yeah, That's a good question, because I feel like not all of us necessarily have the time in the kitchen to weigh out the grains beforehand and just grind that much. Or maybe we just want to refresh our starter and we don't know how much we're going to need. And so we just throw some grains in and then we end up with some left over. And that's kind of normal in a kitchen that's busy and kind of moving all the time, where we can't be completely accurate with scales because we're doing 5 other things perhaps and we just need to know some flour. So it's a great question. Exactly. You know that very well. So ideally, of course, we wouldn't store it at all, because that's the point of grinding it freshly. When it's ground freshly, the enzymes in it haven't been exposed to oxygen, and so they haven't degraded. As soon as that flour is out of your mill and left, then the goodies in it start to disappear. That's the whole point. Nutrient loss in flour is mainly due to that oxygen exposure, oxidation. And, that's happening from the moment we've ground it. You can slow down oxidation by putting your flour in the fridge, or you can slow it down even further by putting your flour in the freezer. So for me, if I have flour left over, sometimes I just measure the flour in the grains and I mill exactly what I want. But sometimes I am refreshing my starter, or I'm making a pancake and I'm not really sure how much I'm going to need. And I just mill, half a cup or a cup. And I do have some left over. I put that in the fridge and I store those flours in the fridge. So I have, the container with the flour in and then a little label on it, which tells me what type of flour it is, because otherwise it's just going to be in the fridge and I'm going to forget whether it's spelt or rye or millet. So I always label it. If you want to store it longer than a couple of days, you could put it in the freezer. It's kind of like, with fermentation. If you leave it on the counter, it's going to go quickly. If you put it in the fridge, it's going to slow down. If you put your water kefir grains in the freezer, they're really going to slow down. It's the same progression. Remember that because we're dealing with whole grain flour, because we've milled it ourselves, the delicate oils that are in the germ have also been exposed to the air. So whole grain flour will not last as long as white flour after it's been ground. So if you've got your whole grain flour and you sieve it and you've just got white flour, that's going to last longer because you've sieved out the germ, which has the oil in, and therefore that's not going to go rancid, because exposing that germ to oxygen will make it go rancid. So the way that my kitchen generally works is that I usually do have a stash of pre-ground rye flour in the fridge for making my starter and for lining tins. Other than that, I try not to have extra flour. I do sometimes, because that's what happens. But I purposefully make rye flour and leave some in the fridge, because I always want some to line a tin with. And, sometimes I think, the starter needs refreshing, and I can just grab that flour out of the fridge, and that's really useful to have. I think regarding the timings, Rachel's question on timings, it's hard to say. Ideal is you use it immediately. Acceptable for me in the fridge would be a week to 10 days, I think. And in the freezer, a couple of weeks. It's usually, for me, not a lot I have left over. So, I'm not going to have a pound and a half of flour left over, 600 grams of flour left over. That's what I use in a loaf. I'm going to have more like 50 grams of flour left over, a couple of ounces. So in reality, if I end up adding that to a new loaf, which has got, 600 grams in it, that's 50 grams of old flour. I'm not that bothered about it really, that it's been in the fridge for, a week, 10 days. So I say go with the flow, but yeah, that would be ideal immediately, maybe a week to 10 days in the fridge and a couple of weeks in the freezer. Does that make sense, Andrea?
That makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of keeping a little bit on hand for just feeding a starter maybe quickly. That's perfect. And for me, since I don't really want to have to turn the power on just to feed a starter, I don't usually keep flour in the freezer, but I'm kind of thinking, oh, I might do that just to be able to feed it more conveniently. So,
Okay, the next two
all right,
questions are kind
you
of
ready?
the same. So do you want to read them both?
Okay. Yeah, you let me know if there's any nuance you want to add in or if they've already been answered. Okay. Rachel asked, what are the differences in types of mills, stone mill versus impact? How much does the higher heat produced by an impact mill affect the nutrients in the grain?
Yeah.
All right. She's getting into the details here.
And do you want to read Paige's question as well?
Yes. I have the same question, says Paige. I get mixed thoughts on stone mills versus impact mills on the nutrition quality of the flour, and I'm torn personally between buying a Wonder Mill or a mock mill. So the Wonder Mill is an impact mill,
Right.
and the mock mill is the stone mill that you have. So that is why she's contrasting those two.
Yeah, right. So we talked about this a little bit in that episode that I mentioned at the front, this episode, which I think was 82. But I do want to speak to it a bit here because I did a bit more research on it. So obviously heat does have an impact on nutrient loss. The higher the heat, the more nutrients we are potentially going to lose. I think, in my opinion, using the flour quickly is more important because oxidization produces nutrient loss very definitely. The newer impact mills that you can buy now have better airflow designed into them, and so they can keep flour at a similar temperature to a stone mill. That's what I looked. I've looked recently and kind of researched the difference between them. So both types of mills seem to keep the flour under the 135F, which is 57C. That Pleasant Hill grain, a very big company, say that nutrient degradation starts. So for both an impact mill and a stone mill, if you follow that figure, you're not going to be losing any nutrients by just milling. Obviously, you're going to be if you leave the flour out, but not by just milling.
Right.
I know, though, that enzyme degradation starts at 41C, which is 105F. Because of my raw food days, you would never heat anything above 41C if you were raw fooding, because that's when you start to lose enzymes. So I think there is going to be some damage by the heat that the mill is producing. And if you're concerned about that, then you can do what we said earlier and freeze your grains. But I don't think there's a massive difference between an impact mill, a modern impact mill, and a stone mill on that one.
Okay.
But yeah, go back and have a listen to episode 82 as well, because there's a lot more in there on the difference between those two. If you're kind of questioning, should I get the Wonder Mill, should I get an impact mill, should I get the mock mill, go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question from me. I responded to your call for questions and I said, I want to learn more about fresh milling gluten-free grains and the benefits of that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
we're going to be talking in the next section of the podcast specifically about oatmeal and corn, which are both obviously gluten-free grains.
I didn't even know you could put oat through it never crossed my mind. So, okay.
You don't want to know how many times I've done that and how many times I've made notes.
I do want to know, actually.
But so we'll be talking about those a bit later, so I won't specifically focus on those. But basically, is there a grain that you can't mill? I just don't think there is. I mean, I regularly mill in my mock mill buckwheat, oats, corn, brown rice, white rice, and I've also in the past ground teff and quinoa. I don't do those regularly.
Okay.
But I don't think there's any grain that you couldn't put through a mill. And, as long as it's dry, you'll be able to grind it really finely and you'll be getting freshly milled grains for your gluten-free pancakes or gluten-free bread. It's just wonderful. So you just need to start, I think. You need to start doing it.
The taste difference with gluten-free products. So I have some, I think it's all gone now, but I had some pre-milled gluten-free flours and I kind of just used them up in whatever. But I've been grinding it in the Vitamix because my mill's pretty much just full of wheat, as you know. And so, gosh, the taste is amazing. The flavor difference. I mean,
So
everything
different.
just.
I mean, we talked about that in episode 82, just the difference in flavor between shop bought flour and freshly milled flour. It's incomparable.
Yeah, you get to taste the benefits of those grains, or, the things that they bring to the table, quite literally, as opposed to just, here's some faceless, nameless kind of bland grain that doesn't taste like anything. On the note of the mock mill, Allison, I want to make sure to note, if somebody is listening to this and thinking about getting a mock mill, go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/milling, because not only do you have really good information as well as pictures there on the different sizes and models and what people might be looking for and using it for, but if you want to shop for a mock mill, go through that link, because the podcast gets immediate turnaround benefit from mock mill. It does not cost the listener any more. It doesn't change the price of your machine that you're buying, but they just give us credit for having pointed customers their way. If you don't go through our link and then buy your mock mill from there, there's no way to tell them, and we don't really get any benefits. So, somebody just bought one the other day, and she told me that she used our link. So I was like, I should ask Allison if that popped up. So that was really awesome. So yeah, ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/milling. And you put a lot of, it's a full article. The links are there, but it's also a full article with a little more detail than what you're going into here on some
there might
things.
be a cute picture of Gabriel in there. It's quite young.
I know. Every time I see pictures of Gabriel or the kids, that we used early on in the podcast, I'm like, wow, we've been doing this for a couple years now, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have another question about sieving. Yeah. And can you sieve these flours? Maybe talk a little bit about that. You've kind of briefly alluded to it already once.
Yeah, you can sieve. Obviously, it's just going to take you more time, because the beauty of having a stone mill on the counter is that you measure out your grains, you put it through the mill, and being you've got flour, you make bread. It takes minutes. If you want to sieve, by all means sieve, but it's going to take you more time. It's going to use more equipment and utensils and more clearing up, but you can. Okay. My recommendation with that is to use a bowl that's substantially bigger than your sieve, because if you just use a bowl that's the same size as a sieve, it just goes everywhere and it goes all over the side and all over the counter.
I have tried that. Yeah, exactly. It is torture.
So make sure your sieve fits neatly right inside that bowl to avoid dustiness and mess everywhere. I invested last year in a sieve set. So rather than having, kind of 2 or 3 sieves around that all have their own handles and all everything, I've got a big kind of metal, I suppose it looks like the sides of a high cake tin, one of those loose bottom cake tins where you just circles like a wheel. And then there are 6 different sieves that fit inside. So you just pop.
Wow.
Put it down, push it down, and it clicks into place.
You mean different finenesses?
Yes, different grades. I think that's the technical term. Grades. Different grades.
That sounds better.
So unfortunately, the one I bought didn't say what the different grades were. So I had to get a magnifying glass out, because that's what I like. Because
I need to know.
I had to do it with oats to really and figure out how to produce fine oatmeal, medium oatmeal, and coarse oatmeal. So I had to know the size of the sieve so I could tell someone how to do it. So we had to get a magnifying glass out and the ruler and everything. But so
I love that.
These 6 sieves, and it's so useful because I just pop one out, put the next one in, pop one out, put the next one in. So you can sieve one.
Oh, do you mean in terms? Do you mean in terms of I sieve it and then I put the next grade in, or you just? Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
So you can sieve it for a grade that's bigger.
How fine does it get?
I can get very fine.
I have to know.
They're like I think it's like 0.5 millimeter. The smallest one I've got.
Gosh, so I don't even know what that looks like. But
you can through the next one, you can zip it through the next one, and then you get such fine flour. And then you can do what you said earlier, which is you can sieve some of it, and then the thing that's left in the sieve, you can put it through the mill again. So you'll get that far more fine if you want to. So having a sieve set is particularly useful. We'll talk about it when we talk about oats a bit later on. So yeah, that's sieving. It's simple. It takes time, and it's useful to have a sieve set for that.
Okay. Follow up on that question is from Shannon. Yeah, can I read this one?
Yeah, go.
She said, okay, I also want to know more about the recipe/nutritional effects of sifting some of the bran out. Yeah, what are we doing when we do that?
Yeah, okay.
That's a good one.
There's something that Lizzie put in the forum, the Discord forum, that I want you to read, Andrea, because it's really useful.
Oh, got it.
She's done some work on this. Do you want to do that?
Yep. Okay, Lizzie, supporters have heard her on the after show. She did a full episode for us with you on literally professionally tasting food and learning how to describe food. And if you're a supporter, go into the Discord. You can follow her channel in there where she's doing this entire grain flavor wheel. I think I got it wrong. Project, and she posts articles in there every so periodically as she tastes different grains and hybrids and things. So here's what she said. I have sifted the bran out of some of my recipes. I made a cake for my grandson, and the last time I made it with the bran, the cake had a coarseness to it that did not fit the style of the cake. I put the bran in a jar in my freezer, so the bran that she sifted out of the next time she made the cake. And I will roll a loaf of bread in it before putting it in the bread tenderize. What? I also want to duplicate a roll recipe, and the bran can cut the strands of gluten and keep a dough from developing larger holes. So for that recipe, the rolls, I sifted again. It's not very often, but wow, I am always surprised to see how much bran is actually in the flour. Yeah, Allison, do you have that thing over there, like bran muffins, where you make these recipes? They're supposed to be healthy fibers or something like that.
They are.
I just know the name, right? So I guess my mom always used whole wheat, so I guess they were bran muffins anyways, right?
Yeah,
but
the bran in them. Not as constant.
Yeah.
Bran. You can buy bran in the health food store.
Oh, so if you're making a bran muffin, are you saying you'd be putting in more bran than would come in the...
Oh, yes.
Okay, which I guess if you made a batch of cake, if you made a batch of rolls, then you would be accumulating bran, so you could do that.
Yeah, you could if you
theoretically.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, talk to us about this.
So, yeah, I wanted to read that quote from Lizzie because I thought it was really useful because she's actually doing it in the kitchen. And Shannon asked the kind of nutritional effects of sifting out the bran.
Right.
I think, most of the nutrients in bread flour are in the bran and the germ. And so if you grind them up and then sift them out, you are taking those nutrients out of your flour and potentially your bread. That's why, we often hear people saying, white flour, it's just empty calories, because it's just the white bit, the endosperm of the grain, which really doesn't have any nutrients in it. It just has energy in it because it's the energy that's required for the germ inside to germinate. It feeds it for the germ. So it's energy. So you're missing out on the nutrients in bread.
So the germ is like I'm thinking of it like an egg, like the yolk and the white.
Yeah. The germ,
kind of like the nutrients
the germ is like the little
side of it
in the egg that is that sort of spot that sometimes you see in it. And then the endosperm is the yellow bit because that's the bit that feeds germ inside. If we're going to do that analogy. Anyway, the white's probably the chaff on the grain when it's in the field, maybe. Anyway, if you want to have your flour more fine, and that's why you're taking the bran out, you can do what we were talking about a bit earlier, which is where you sift the bran out and then put that bran again through your mill. And if you do that, that bran will break down somewhat more, and any germ that you've sifted out will break down somewhat more. And then if you sieve it again, you will get finer versions of that bran and germ in with your white flour. Again, that takes time, which is why I don't do it. As well as missing out on the nutrients, if you get rid of that bran, you're missing out on the fibre because the bran is the fibre, which is why there are bran muffins, because the idea of a bran muffin is to give you extra fibre to keep you regular. So you're missing out on that fibre. On the flip side of it, potentially, you are removing the problems of phytic acid, because phytic acid is in the bran of a grain. So if you remove the bran from the grain, then you are removing the phytic acid. So potentially you are solving that problem, but really you're not solving that problem because you're not getting the nutrients, because you're not having the grain. So rather than the phytic acid killing the nutrients when it gets into your stomach or stopping you absorbing them, you're not even getting the nutrients in the first place. So I think that cancels itself out, if that makes any sense. As you said, there's a lot of bran, as Lizzie said as well. There will be a lot of bran if you sift it out, so do use it. I think Lizzie's idea of coating a loaf in it is absolutely brilliant. You can make bran muffins. You can take that bran and soak it to make it softer and put it back in your bread. Because a lot of the reason that we freshly mill flour is because we want to save money. And so if you're sifting that bran out regularly, then you're costing yourself a lot more. So try to use that bran. Okay, the last question in this section is from Paige, who asked a kind of a similar question, which is, I'd love to know if you get any benefits from the freshly milled flour if you mix it with pre-ground flour, or if that kind of ruins it. I go back to what I said earlier, which is, if I've kept flour in the fridge for like a week or 10 days, it's usually only a small amount that I mix with my freshly ground flour, and I'm not bothered that I've lost some of the nutrients. It's kind of the same with pre-ground flour. Sometimes for some reasons I will buy some pre-ground flour. So for example, I've been making cakes for some of Gable's friends for their birthdays. And 2 of the boys who go to all the parties are celiac. And so I can't put the flour for those cakes through my mill, because my mill has been used and is used regularly to grind gluten-containing grains. So sometimes, in this example, I buy pre-ground flour. And I think if I had some of that left, I wouldn't be bothered about putting a little bit in with my freshly ground flour. But that pre-ground flour that I've bought from a shop will have all the downsides that we've talked about of pre-ground flour. It will have lost its nutrients. It would have been on the shelf for ages. And so, if you want to mix them together, you can. And if you mix it, the freshly milled flour is going to have some really good benefits in it. But if you end up doing it all the time and putting large amounts of pre-ground flour in, you're going to be losing quite a lot of benefits, I think. Does that make sense, Andrea? And do you have any other questions?
It does. No, that's good.
No, okay. Let's go to
No, I like it.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So let's go to an ad break and be back to talk some more stuff in a moment. Do you love oats? Want to try your hand at a traditional Scottish oat fermentation? Suans is just that. It was made in Scotland for centuries and will give you both a creamy, easy-to-digest porridge and a tangy probiotic drink. My video course, Suans, the Scottish Oat Ferment, over at the Fermentation School, will guide you through everything you need to know to create these 2 ancestral foods in your own kitchen, no matter what equipment you have. Head to ancestralkitchen.com/Suans, ancestralkitchen.com/Suans, SOWANS, or click the link in the show notes to get a 10% discount automatically applied. Okay, so we're going to talk on other things we can do in the mock mill and some interesting things. Andrea, do you want to read Rachel's first question here?
Yeah, this is a fun one. Rachel says, what are other uses I'm missing out on besides grains? The wildest I've gotten is grinding popcorn kernels to make cornbread, but I'm sure there's lots more.
Yeah,
First of all, I didn't know you could grind popcorn kernels.
Yeah.
Is this something she does, or does she mean dried corn, which is different than popcorn kernels?
I think she means corn that's dried and could therefore be made into popcorn if you wanted it to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not already
not-
popped, you know.
Yeah. I'm sure some corn person out there could maybe show us a diagram of all the terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I
Okay.
think we tend to forget that you can use mills for lots of other things other than just grinding grain for bread. And it's taken me a while to get used to using the mock mill for other things, but slowly I'm getting there. So you can grind spices and herbs in your mock mill. And when I went to see Nicole in Italy, she was doing that kind of routinely. I was like, oh, I've forgotten you could do
What?
that.
Spices?
So
Okay.
yeah, you
help
can
me-
literally put whole cinnamon sticks in the mock mill,
What?
which is
Wait,
quite
you can
amazing.
grind your cinnamon? I did not know that. And it doesn't just kind of get lost in between the stones.
No, you can grind
Do you
it.
have
I
to do
mean,
a lot?
you look at the mock mill grinding chart. I will put links to one of them in the show notes, and that will tell you know what number you can grind them at, because some of them you can't grind right down on the finest setting, and that's probably true of every other mill. I think you've got to put a reasonable amount in there, because otherwise, you know, there's always a little bit that gets left in the machinery, and so if you're only going to put, you know, a couple of teaspoons in, that's really not going to provide anything. So if you're doing them on their own, then you'd want to put a fair bit in there for it to come through. But you can also do it within your flour. So if you want to put some, if you're making like pumpernickel and you want to put some anise, or you want to put some caraway within your rye bread, then you can just literally put your rye grains in there and put the caraway in at the same time, and then the caraway will be ground.
I did not see this coming.
Amazing.
This was not on my mock mill bingo card. And do you have to run something afterwards to kind of
I think if the spice is particularly pungent, you can run through some, you know, harder grain like rice or millet to clean it out at the end. It depends how fussy you are about whether that flavour might go into the next thing that you grind through. Generally, we wouldn't be bothered. You know, if there's a tiny bit of caraway that comes out in some pancakes after I've made rye bread, we're not going to be bothered by that. So, the other thing you can do is seeds. Now, you have to be careful with seeds, because obviously they are oily. And the oilier something is, the more likely it is to gum up the mill. So what I generally do with seeds is just mix them in with my bread. So when I make gluten-free bread, I quite often put linseed, which is flaxseed, in with it. And although we've usually got linseed in the fridge pre-ground, because I grind it every 3 or 4 days and then keep a stash in the fridge, sometimes we haven't. And in that case, I would just put the whole linseeds in with my flour, mix it up so they're not all like going to be resting on the top and go through the mill at the same time. I'll mix them in and then I'll put them through. You have to be careful what percentage you put through, because I've done it too much in the past. I've put too much linseed in. Maybe if I'm making gluten-free, sometimes I'm using, 4 different grains. And so the amount of those grains is lower. You know, I've only got 100 grams, like 4 ounces of one of them, you know, rather than 600 grams, you know, over a pound. And so you just have to be careful not to put too much in, because I've done it where I've just been, you know, only grinding a little bit of buckwheat, and then I've put some linseed in and I've been like, oh, the mill stopped. But it's not, now I'm used to undoing the mock mill and cleaning it out. It's not really been a problem. You know, I either run some other grains through it, or I just take the lid off and use a little brush and brush it through, and then I put the lid back on. So it's not.
My mind is
if you do it,
completely just in shock. Like I, my mind is whirling now. I want to try.
If you do it wrong, it is salvageable. It's not something that you're going to be, oh my gosh, I've got to send it back. You know, you'll actually get used to taking the mill apart and much more familiar with it. So that's a good thing. The one tip I would say is, if you do take your mill apart, if you've got a mock mill, there are 2 tiny little springs that hold the top stone away from the bottom stone, and they are really difficult to they're really easy rather to lose. And so in the past, I've tipped my mock mill upside. First time I ever did it, I tipped the mock mill upside down to get the residual stuff that was stuck in there out. We didn't realise this was a mock mill cleaning podcast, and the spring went, and I don't know where it went because I wasn't paying attention.
Oh.
And luckily, I contacted Mock Mill and they said, oh, we'll just send you some new strings. So they sent me another set.
I remember that. I
think I told you about it.
Yeah.
So just be careful of the little springs if you do need to clean it out, because you do put too much seeds in. But you can do seeds. You can crack pulses. So if you've got, chickpeas or some other pulse that you want to cook and you want them smaller, you can crack them in the mock mill. You can grind chia seeds in the mock mill. You can also grind pulses into a flour. So the mock mill can grind peas, it can grind kidney beans, it can grind lentils into a flour on the lowest setting. I've never done it, but it says you can do it. So I think, you could make a dal with it. You can make interesting porridges with a mill. So you could, for example, put in a mix of grains, not just oats. You could put oats, rye, buckwheat, emmer, and grind them so that they have some bite to them before cooking. You don't have to have it on the finest setting. Porridge could be made like a steel cut kind of size of porridge, and you can just make up your own porridges by pouring whatever grains you want, putting the settings to higher, grinding them, and then you've got a kind of a custom porridge mix, which is fun.
I want to do this so badly now.
Psyllium seeds. Psyllium seeds is another one. Now, I've read Naomi Devlin, the gluten-free sourdough baker, who wrote the River Cottage book and has written another book since then, talking about how the thickness of your psyllium is quite important in gluten-free bread making. And if yours is too thick, therefore, you can put it through the mock mill to make it thinner, or you can buy the seeds. So it's not been previously ground.
Coarse,
put them through.
Like coarse.
Yeah, if it's that's what I mean, too coarse.
Talk about that. They say, you might feel like a recipe didn't come out and the texture was off, and it's often, they seem to be implying that, like, there's a lot of brands where the coarse grind, it's not necessarily bad, but it's for a different purpose.
Yeah,
baking,
absolutely.
Apparently. So
and so that if you put it through the mock mill, you'll be able to make it finer, or buy the seeds, which haven't been ground. So obviously they're going to keep longer, and grind it yourself.
Yeah. Gosh.
Sprouted grains can go through the mock mill as well. You do have to remember, if you're sprouting them yourself at home, that they must be completely dehydrated, because any mill is not going to do well unless it's designed to work with wet grains, which we'll talk about a bit later. It won't work well with anything wet. It needs to be completely dry. So if you do sprout your own grains, make sure you dehydrate them before you put them through the mill completely. So you can make your own malt. You can make malt to put in beer, or you can make malt to add to breads, which adds a really sweet, deep flavour to it.
Could you?
So that's lots of ideas.
Dry out your beer grains and grind them? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was doing that mostly, I didn't have a mock mill, so I wasn't grinding them. I was drying them out and then putting them on my bread kind of whole, because we didn't have a mock mill, putting them through my crank grinder. But I don't see why you couldn't put them through the mock mill. Okay, Rachel's got another question, Andrew. Do you want to read that one too?
How and why to choose the setting, coarse versus fine? I'm particularly interested in this because the mill that I currently have, which is an old one that my mom had since I was a child, doesn't, I mean, it has a slight variation, but it's not like the mock mill where you can choose different settings. So my mom and I are both planning to get mock mills, and this is going to be something that we'll have a lot of fun toying around with, but I don't know anything about this part.
Yeah, okay. So the mock mill is similar to the other mills like the Como, and when you look at a mock mill from the side, you've got a lever and it says 1 to 10, and the 1 is the finest and the 10 is the widest that you can see.
Ah, okay.
What's interesting is that you can push that lever through to 10, which seems like it's the widest, but then you can loosen the lever so it's not actually active, pull the lever back to number 1, tighten it up again, and then push it to number 10 again, which in effect is number 20.
So it's 20.
And you can do it again to number 30. So I do that quite regularly, and often forget to put it back to number 1, which really annoys Rob. And he's like, "What's going on? My grains are coming out all chunky." "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to put it." And he doesn't know how to put it back.
It's 30, not...
Yeah, he doesn't want to know how to put it back. So when that happens, he just goes, "Oh, can't do anything. You need to come and sort it out, Alison."
You know
he's
what?
a bit scared, I think.
He bails us out enough that he gets this one.
Yeah, exactly. I'll let him have that one. So really, what I was talking about earlier with the different ways you can use the mock mill is where that coarse versus fine comes in a grinder. And I just say experiment with it. don't be scared to push it to 10, to push it to 20, to push it to 30. Put things through and see how they come out. Put pulses through, see how they come out. Put oats through, see how they come out. I often grind my oats more thickly if I want to create that different texture for my porridge that we were talking about. And you could do that for any type of grain or pulse. The mock meal, as I said, does have a guide which explains what's the finest level you can grind any of the different products at. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And we had a question about corn, which is just, can I mill corn?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I was at Nicole's, I said, I've never ground corn in my mill. And she looked it up for me. And on the mock mill 100, which I have, you need to mill it at number 15 first, which is basically what I said. You put it around to 10, you disengage it, bring it back to 1, and then put it around to 5. So you've got 15. And then that goes through to break up that corn to start with. So just like what Rachel was saying, she's ground popcorn kernels. You would grind them like that first, which makes them a little bit smaller because corn's really hard. And then once they're broken up a little bit, you put the setting back to a fine setting. You can put it right down to 1 and put the corn through. And it just makes it a bit easier in the mill.
That's a good idea. I would like to be able to mill the corn for our corn tortillas. Is that, do you think I could get it down fine enough?
Yeah, I don't know about your mill, but you would be able to on a mock mill. Yeah,
no,
definitely.
I can definitely tell you I cannot mill it right now. I could for sure say that. Okay, and then before we move away from these kind of oddball ones, I wanted to ask about oats because I know I've heard things floating around in the ether about oats gumming up mills and stuff. So could you put oats through the mock mill? And
that's a good question. So yes, you can. And as you probably aren't surprised to hear, I've done lots of experiments with trying to put oats through the mock mill. So the reason why they can gum up the mill, any mill, is because they are higher in fat than most grains. And that fat obviously is more liquidy than the dry part of the grain and then can gum it up. When you look at the paperwork for the mock mill 100, it says not to mill oats finer than number 3. In my experiments, I kind of don't like them. Don't like doing them on the first grind any finer than 5, which I'll explain in a little bit. So, if first of all, say you want steel cut oats, which are those thicker oats to make your porridge, you can mill your oats on what would be number 20 on the mock mill. It'll be a wide setting on one of the other mills. When you do that on any stone mill and you grind at a coarser level, you still end up getting some fine bits of grain. So it won't look exactly like steel cut oats that you would buy from a store because you'll have some bits that are big, like steel cut oats, but you will also have some bits that are much, much, much smaller. And if you cook that mix without putting it through a sieve, if you just put it straight in your pan and make porridge with it, it works really well, but it doesn't replicate the texture of commercial steel cut oats because the smaller bits in it, which aren't in steel cut oats, they sieve them out, soak up more water, and then you end up with a porridge that has a consistency that's more gluey than one that's just made with larger particles of oats. So you can go ahead and do that, or if you want to try to replicate steel cut oats a bit more, then you need to use a sieve to sieve out those small bits, which will be more like fine oat flour, which you could use for something else, pancakes, and then use what's left in your sieve to make porridge. With that same idea in mind, with the sieve, you can make fine oatmeal. And that's, when I say fine oatmeal, I mean it's like a bread flour, slightly coarser than a bread flour, but not much more coarse. And that's the oatmeal that I use at home for oat cakes and a lot of my other recipes. So the way I do that is I first mill the oats at number 5 on the mock mill. So that would be kind of not fine, but not coarse if you're using another sort of mill. Then I put that through a sieve and about 70% of it goes through. The bigger bits that are left in the sieve that haven't gone through it, I put back in the mock mill and I make the lever finer because at that point you can put it through more finely. So I generally put the lever on 3 and then I catch what comes out and I put that through the sieve. And then usually I do it a third time. And there's, at the end of that process, there's usually only I think I worked out 2% that's left over that hasn't been ground really, really finely. There is a very detailed article on my website that explains the grade of sieves that I use and how I do it, and it's got pictures. So I will put that in the show notes, so people, if they want to try that, can follow my instructions on it.
Yes, please. I will.
Okay. So we're gonna have an after show now. Do you want to just let listeners know what? Because there are two really good questions we're gonna answer in the after show. So just explain what they are.
Okay, so we've got these are good questions. One is, I want to know more about making a lighter and less crumbly sandwich bread with 100% fresh milled flour, like we did in the 90s with the questionable dough enhancer. Anybody else remember that with the Bosch mixer? Yes, I was there. That was a homeschool subculture. If you had the Bosch mixer, you had the grinder, and you had the tub of dough enhancer. Although I don't know why it never really caught on in our household, but everywhere else I went, I saw that dough enhancer. And I don't even know what it does. So I guess it made it softer. I don't know.
Yeah,
and then
probably.
the other question is, I would love to learn more about how people are wet milling like masa or soy milk and mixing oily things like tahini. Yeah, I want to know that too. So that'll be a great after show after this main show, which people can find the after show. It's an entire extra podcast for all of our supporters who keep this on the air. We've just got an extra show for them, and it has more episodes than this feed does, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So you can find that if you are a supporter, that all of that information would have come to your email.
Brilliant. Okay, so just before we head off, I want to remind people that we've got our home milling guide on our website. The link is in the show notes, or it's just ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/milling. Thank you very much for being my foil, Andrea, and listening and asking all great questions.
I'm so excited about this. And use that mock mill link in the...
Yeah. Thank you for reminding.
Don't send the mock mill link to somebody. You got to send them the Ancestral Kitchen link. I feel like I've said it a bunch of times now. And so now people message me and they're like, hey, I used your link. And I'm like, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
It's such a score when they do that. So thank you everybody who's been doing that and telling us you're using it.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, let's head over to the after show then, Andrea. See you on the other side.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can join our community. Choose from various levels depending on your budget. Take a look at what we offer at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/join. You can sponsor an episode or check out our beautiful sustainable merchandise at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/merch. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you know someone who would love our show, tell them about us. Thank you. You are helping bring ancestral food into modern kitchens, changing the world one plate at a time.